Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with Helen Owodia. Coming up tonight, the new Chancellor sets out an emergency budget, abolishing the top rate of income tax and lifting the cap on bonuses for bankers in what opposition parties call unfair and outdated. A look back at the week in Westminster as Liz Truss's government not only set out the new budget, but reversed the ban on fracking. John Johnston from Politics Home will be here. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. Plus, award-winning crime fiction author Peter James releases his latest book and tells us about some interesting first-hand research with a former art forger. And our resident art critic, James Nichols, takes us through the best exhibitions to see in the capital this week, including at the National Gallery and sculptures in Regent's Park. First tonight, though, Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng announced what he called a new era for Britain's economy in an emergency budget in the House of Commons. During the speech, he abolished the top rate of income tax for the highest earners and set out tens of billions of pounds of spending in a gamble to drive upward growth for the UK during the cost of living crisis. Among policies, including cuts to stamp duty, the Chancellor told the Commons he would be lifting the cap on bonuses for those working in banking, saying we needed to encourage investment and the creation of jobs in the industry here in London. The announcement was met with lots of kickback from the opposition.
Now, Mr. Speaker, this brings me to the cap on bankers' bonuses. A strong UK economy has always depended on a strong financial services sector. We need global banks to create jobs here, invest here, and pay taxes here in London. In London, not in Paris, not in Frankfurt, and not in New York. All the bonus cap did was to push up the basic salaries of bankers or drive activity outside Europe. It never capped total remuneration. So let's not sit here and pretend otherwise. It didn't cap total remuneration. So as a consequence of this, Mr. Speaker, we are going to get rid of it. Yeah. And to reaffirm, we're going to get rid of it. And to reaffirm, the UK's status as the world's financial services centre, I will set out an ambitious package of regulatory reforms later in the autumn.
Well, after Mr. Kwarteng had laid out the plans, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said the strategy amounts to an admission of 12 years of economic failure under successive Conservative governments, based on an outdated and inadequate ideology that benefits the wealthy.
Can I thank the Chancellor on his comprehensive demolition of the record of the last 12 years. Their record, their failure, their vicious circle of stagnation. The Chancellor has confirmed that the costs of the energy price cap will be funded by borrowing, leaving the eye-watering windfall profits of the energy giants untaxed. The oil and gas producers will be toasting the Chancellor in the boardrooms as we speak, while working people are left to pick up the bill.
That was Rachel Reeves there. Well, the total cost of the government's planned energy package was also announced, one the Chancellor said could change as they negotiate further contracts with energy suppliers.
But based on recent prices, the total cost of the energy package for the 6 months from October is expected to be around £60 billion. We expect the cost to come down as we negotiate new long-term energy contracts with suppliers. And in the context of a global energy crisis, Mr. Speaker, it is entirely appropriate for the government to use our borrowing powers to fund temporary measures in order to support families and businesses. That's exactly what we did during the COVID-19 pandemic. A sizable intervention was right then, and it is right now. The heavy price of inaction would have been far greater than the cost of these schemes.
The overall budget plans were also challenged by the Shadow Chancellor for Wales, who said she believed the government's plan is casino economics.
It's very clear from what's been announced today who the government's priorities are. You know, we've seen the top rate of tax being abolished, we've seen investment bankers' bonuses cut, we've seen enormous borrowing, massive borrowing by government at a time when interest rates are going up, rather than go to the excess profits of the oil and gas producers with a windfall tax to fund some of the announcements today, and an attack on workers' rights yet again. You know, everybody contributes to the wealth of this country. Everybody should be able to share in the return on it. But that's not what's happened today. This is about making people who are very wealthy even more wealthy. And businesses have not been asking for corporation tax cuts. You know, we've got a ridiculous situation today where the energy package for businesses means that oil and gas producers themselves, who've got offices in the UK, will have help with their energy bills. I mean, you know, it's just nonsense. This whole thing is just casino economics. It's irresponsible and it's reckless.
There we are. Well, shortly after the budget was announced, Mayor of London Sadiq Khan echoed the sentiments of Labour's Rachel Reeves, saying the measures in the budget are unfair, pointing to the cost of living crisis and adding that the Chancellor has prioritised massive unfunded tax giveaways for the wealthy rather than helping those households that are really struggling. He added that Londoners will be disappointed at the lack of immediate help. Well, let's get more reaction to the budget now. And earlier, I spoke to Greg Marsh, the founder of Nouse.co, a website that helps consumers understand how rising costs will affect them and helps them to save money on their energy bills.
It was a bold budget and clearly a budget that's intended to try to kickstart growth in the economy through a very large set of tax cuts, particularly for people on higher incomes. And our focus at Nouse.co, we're a cost of living service and trying to help people get on top and stay on top of their household bills. Our focus is on folks a bit lower down the income pyramid, and today's budget for a typical family on a medium income will have saved them a little bit of money, probably about 10, maybe £20 a week, depending on whether it's one or two income earners in the household. Put that in context, though, the same household, even with the cap on energy tariffs, is probably going to be paying £30 more a week for their energy now than they were this time last year. So this budget helps a little, but it only goes some of the distance to offsetting the additional costs of living just for energy bills for those on a medium income.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, Nouse is really there to try and help people to save money on their energy bills. What are your kind of top tips, not just on energy bills, but other rising costs? There's also food, there's petrol, there's utilities.
While this problem started, if you will, with a sharp rise in energy costs, which has continued over the last few quarters, it's cascaded into every corner of our lives. As you say, food, fuel, crucially, interest rates, these add up. And our advice for households, just as Kwarteng presented the national budget today, or a not budget, but it was effectively a budget. So we encourage households to do their own budget. If it's the first time you've done that as a household, make use of the free tools out there. You can use our free tools at Nouse.co. There are lots of other things available online to help you with this. What's crucial is you look at what both the budget today, but more generally, what's likely to happen to the different costs and buckets of cost for running your home, and take a view of that over not just a 6-month period, but a 12 or 18-month period. So you can start to get a sense for how much more will winter cost me when my heating is on, what's going to be the effect of interest rate rises over time, depending on when we or when my family is refinancing our mortgage or likely to refinance a mortgage, or if rents are likely to increase.
Well, you mentioned there in that as well, mortgages. Let's just quickly talk about that. Was there anything in the Chancellor's budget that was about mortgages or would benefit those who are trying to buy a house?
The cuts to stamp duty will particularly help first-time buyers. And so folks who are getting on or trying to get onto the property ladder may take some comfort from today's announcement. However, there is unfortunately a grey cloud for which that is the silver lining. Interest rates have risen very quickly. They were less than 0.25% at the end of last year. They are now over 2%, and most forecasters expect them to double from here. Now, the effect of that is anyone who is planning to get a mortgage, sooner the better. Folks who already have a mortgage that they're paying down, be wary that when you come to refinance that mortgage, particularly if you had a fixed rate deal that you secured during those very low interest rate periods, it's going to be a lot more expensive, and your monthly repayments could be very significantly higher. And if the announcements today threaten to do anything, they may put even more pressure on the Bank of England to increase interest rates faster. So there's no free lunch here. The benefits that were announced today that may help people get on the housing ladder will to some extent, or may to some extent, end up getting paid for by folks who are already on that housing ladder.
There we are. That was Greg Marsh, the founder of Nous.co there. Right, let's take a look at London's weather for you now. And the rain continues until this evening, where it is a slightly chillier night with overnight temperatures of around 11 degrees. Tomorrow, it's a dull start to the weekend, cloudy all day with highs of 17. A similar picture on Sunday, but we might get some sunny intervals throughout the day. Unfortunately, those sunny spells don't seem to last long. Looking ahead to the start of next week, there's thick cloud all Monday with some light rain showers expected throughout the day. Right, time for a break now, but when we come back, we'll be taking a look back at the week in Westminster and the world of politics with John Johnston from Politics Home. See you soon.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at some other stories affecting Londoners. Publisher HarperCollins has announced that author Dame Hilary Mantel has died aged 70. The writer won the Booker Prize twice, first for her famous 2009 novel Wolf Hall, and again for its sequel, Bring Up the Bodies, in 2012. A statement read that she died yesterday, suddenly yet peacefully, surrounded by close family and friends. HarperCollins added that Hilary Mantel was one of the greatest English novelists of this century, and her beloved works are considered modern classics. She will be greatly missed. Around 1,500 people are to receive a new skin cancer treatment that reduces the risk of the disease returning and spreading. The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence has approved Keytruda from pharmaceutical firm MSD for use on the NHS. The drug is suitable for people with stage 2 melanoma whose cancer has been surgically removed. Well, clinical trial results showed that the drug can help people live longer without their cancer coming back, and therefore has the potential to save lives. And the Royal Navy and RAF have destroyed and sunk a warship in the first exercise of its kind in 18 years. A ship, a helicopter and 3 RAF Typhoon planes teamed up with the US and were involved in the live fire practice to sink the decommissioned USS Boone. The exercise took place in the North Atlantic and was the first time in 18 years that the Royal Navy had targeted a real warship, and the first time the Typhoon had been used to drop live ordnance on a warship at sea. Well, a spokesperson for the Navy added that all the toxic materials and pollutants had been removed from the retired USS Boone prior to it being used as a target, and that the rare live test gave allies real-world experience of hitting targets at sea from long range. Right, it's time now for a look at this week in Westminster and what happened in the world of politics. Well, joining me now to talk us through it all is John Johnston from Politics Home. John, thank you so much for being here. Let's start, of course, with the mini budget that we heard this morning. A lift on a cap on bankers' bonuses and a stop to the planned rise in corporation tax. Now, on the face of it, these measures, they seem to only benefit the wealthy. What's the justification for these measures?
I think the corporation tax, the cut, so the plan was that it was going to go from 19% to 25%. That's now been scrapped. I think people kind of thought that might be, a sensible move, given the inflation rates and the government's push for growth. Trying to kind of let companies reinvest profits to try and kind of stimulate more activity in the economy. The bankers' bonuses change was quite unexpected. I mean, it had been trailed by the government, but I think people were quite surprised that they actually went ahead with it. I mean, these were brought in after the 2008 financial crash, partly to try and restrain people from taking risky economic decisions, kind of short-term moves that would see their profits go up that year, which would then be linked to their bonuses. I mean, bonuses were still generous. They could be given bonuses that were equivalent to their salary and could be doubled if shareholders agreed to go ahead. So lifting that is really quite a big move, especially when we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
Absolutely. And, we heard Kwasi Kwarteng kind of heralding the beginning of a new era for Britain's economy. Are his policies, as set out in this budget, particularly different to that of Rishi Sunak's or to those in Boris Johnson's cabinet?
Yeah, I mean, and they kind of tear up a lot of the work that's been done in recent years. Underpinning all of this is their kind of a gamble, essentially, to go for growth. And the justification for doing the banker bonuses cap, lifting that, was that they think that will encourage more people in the financial services industry to set up shop in London. Kwasi Kwarteng saying that because of the cap, it meant that many of these big financial companies were setting up shop outside of Europe, in America and in the East. And I think he hopes that this will make London a very attractive destination for these companies. But, as I said, it's a very difficult one to try and sell to the public when, the cost of living crisis is going on. The energy price hike, while it's been capped, is still going to affect lots of people. It's going to be a very difficult one in terms of optics for them to try and sell to the public.
Absolutely. Well, we also heard in the budget this morning new laws which would make industrial strike action harder. What was it that the Chancellor proposed then?
So the real big change is that they're going to bring forward new legislation that would mean that if a pay offer is made, that members of a union will have to vote on whether to accept that pay change or not. And they have to do that before they can push for strike action. Currently, unions can kind of make their mind up about a pay offer before pushing for, and then they can push for a strike without having to ballot the members. So that would change things and make it harder for unions to go on strike, and would sort of protract a lot of these negotiations out a lot further. Obviously, we've seen major disruption with the train strikes. There's more to come, and I think the government are hoping to make that process harder to limit the impact on commuters and other sectors that are impacted by strikes.
I can imagine not a great reaction from the unions to this announcement then today. What have they said?
The unions are obviously very upset. They're furious, to be honest, with the changes. I think they're packaging this in with the whole wider announcement. While they're making strikes harder, there's also very little in terms of public sector pay. We've seen all these big changes, tax cuts for people on higher incomes, lifting bankers' bonuses, and none of that, really, none of those kind of decisions being made about how people working in the public sector on low wages, how they're going to get a leg up. So that, the unions, I think, are going to be pushing very hard to lobby against this legislation. It obviously hasn't come into place yet, but I think we're going to see a lot more from them over the coming days about what they would like the opposition parties to do to try and block this.
Yeah, well, let's talk about something else that has happened in Liz Truss's government this week. The UK has officially overturned the ban on fracking. Just remind us what happened and what the reaction is.
Yeah, we've had this so-called moratorium in place since 2019, brought in by Boris Johnson, essentially banning the fracking in the UK. They had this kind of proviso in their manifesto that they would maybe lift the moratorium if the science could show that it was safe. But the government, because of the energy crisis and concerns about the UK's own domestic energy supply, have decided to push ahead with that. There has not been any change in the science. In fact, there was a survey published this week that was commissioned by the government by the British Geological Survey, who have said that it's pretty much impossible to forecast. We don't have the data. We don't know really what the impact of fracking would be in terms of earth tremors or other environmental impacts. But the government have pushed ahead regardless. It's really not very popular with lots of Tory MPs, especially up in the north, because many of their constituencies are going to be affected. Many of them are covered by proposed fracking sites. So, the government are going to have a really, really difficult time over this. And, they're already out there complaining about it. And I think that's only going to increase as they push ahead with these plans.
Absolutely. Very interesting then to hear the reaction from inside Westminster to that fracking. Right, well, finally, let's look ahead to the upcoming party conferences. Huge events, obviously, in the political calendar. When are these taking place and what can we expect from them?
So the first one is the Labour conference. It starts tomorrow in Liverpool. Obviously, it was going to be a major moment for Keir Starmer with a new Prime Minister, a new cabinet. But I think the announcements in this budget, being so radical as they are, is really going to turbocharge the conferences. And Labour are really going to be strategising about how they can make their case to the public that the Conservative government are not doing enough for ordinary people. And they'll be really using all of these events at conferences and their speeches to try and tease out the kind of attack lines that we can expect them to use in the coming months, as I imagine they're going to start pushing for a general election. And then the following week, we've got the Conservative conference, where I imagine there'll be many of the same discussions. We'll know a little bit more at that point what the kind of full reaction has been to some of these financial measures that have been announced. But again, really sort of major event for Liz Truss, her first big party conference as leader, trying to kind of bring the party back together after what was quite a fractious Tory leadership contest. So 2 really important conferences this year, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what the parties and the state of the parties look like when we come out the other end.
Interesting indeed. Well, John, thank you so much there for that roundup of the week in Westminster and the world of politics. John Johnston from Politics Home there. You're watching London Live News with Helena Wadia. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, author Peter James on spending time with a real-life art forger for research on his latest book.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. A reminder of some of the stories affecting Londoners and beyond today. Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng announced what he called a new era for Britain's economy in an emergency budget in the House of Commons. During the speech, he abolished the top rate of income tax for the highest earners and set out tens of billions of pounds of spending in a gamble to drive upward growth for the UK during the cost of living crisis. Among policies including cuts to stamp duty, the Chancellor told the Commons he would be lifting the cap on bonuses for those working in banking, saying we need to encourage investment and the creation of jobs in the industry here in London. Well, the announcement was met with lots of kickback from the opposition.
Now, Mr. Speaker, this brings me to the cap on bankers' bonuses. A strong UK economy has always depended on a strong financial services sector. We need global banks to create jobs here, invest here, and pay taxes here in London, not in Paris, not in Frankfurt, and not in New York. All the bonus cap did was to push up the basic salaries of bankers or drive activity outside Europe. It never capped total remuneration. So let's not sit here and pretend otherwise. It didn't cap total remuneration. So as a consequence of this, Mr. Speaker, we are going to get rid of it. And to reaffirm, we're going to get rid of it. And to reaffirm the UK's status as the world's financial services centre, I will set out an ambitious package of regulatory reforms later in the autumn.
Well, after Mr Kwarteng had laid out the plans, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said the strategy amounts to an admission of 12 years of economic failure under successive Conservative governments, based on an outdated and inadequate ideology that benefits the wealthy.
Can I thank the Chancellor on his comprehensive demolition of the record of the last 12 years. Their record, their failure, their vicious circle of stagnation. The Chancellor has confirmed that the costs of the energy price cap will be funded by borrowing, leaving the eye-watering windfall profits of the energy giants untaxed. The oil and gas producers will be toasting the Chancellor in the boardrooms as we speak, while working people are left to pick up the bill.
Some other stories now, and the latest in the inquest of Molly Russell's death, as a North London court was shown footage about suicide and self-harm that the 14-year-old viewed on the social media site Instagram before she took her own life in 2017. The clips were all liked or saved by Molly, who was from Harrow in northwest London. Well, Elizabeth Lagone, an executive from Meta, which owns Instagram, said she was unaware about research into the impact of self-harm-related content on users of the platform, stating it would be difficult research to undertake with ethical considerations. She later added that Meta were confident with their policies and that they do consider the needs of their youngest users. Well, the inquest, which is due to last up to 2 weeks, continues. Well, as more rail strikes are set for the next month, managers on a ferry service in the capital have also voted to strike in a pay dispute. Members of the Unite union on the Woolwich ferry overwhelmingly backed the industrial action in a ballot. Unite General Secretary Sharon Graham said employers were refusing to discuss a pay deal for this year and reiterated there is a short window of opportunity to reach an agreement before the union announces strike dates. Driving instructors in West London have received fixed penalty notices for teaching in car parks. Instructors in Hillingdon are being fined up to £80 for using council car parks to teach parking manoeuvres. There have been at least 27 fixed penalty notices given out so far under public spaces protection orders, and that totals over £2,000 according to a council report published in June. Now, award-winning crime fiction author Peter James has released his latest book, which follows an art dealer getting his hands on what appears to be a multi-million-pound painting and meeting a sticky end when the painting disappears. Well, this book is the latest instalment of the Detective Superintendent Roy Grace series, which is now a TV drama starring John Sim. Well, Hebe has been speaking to Peter James about the novel and about spending time with a former art forger for research.
The basic heart of the story is everybody's dream. I think so many of us go to a car boot sale sometime in our life, hoping that we might buy something that turns out to be incredibly valuable. And the central couple in Picture You Dead, he's a small-time builder, she's a teacher, and they love going to car boot sales on a Sunday. And one particular Sunday, they go to one just outside Brighton, and they see this horrible painting, but in a beautiful frame. And they get it for 20 quid because they like the frame. They're going to cut the painting out and put something they love in the frame. And they get it home, and they realize there's another picture underneath. And they don't know what it is, but there's Antiques Roadshow is coming to their area the following week by sheer chance, and they take it along, and the expert looks at it and he says, "Look, I can't tell you here and now whether this is genuine or not, but this to me looks like a long-lost Fragonard from 1770. And all I can tell you is that the last Fragonard sold at auction for £17 million. And the story goes on from there when they suddenly find their lives changed, but not in a good way.
And tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind this specific book.
I met the character called David Henty back in 2015, who is one of the world's leading art forgers. He even has a blue plaque on the front of his house, which says "World's #1 art forger." And I said to him, "I thought you only got a blue plaque when you were dead." He said, "Yeah, I forged it." He had an extraordinary career. He'd started life forging British passports, got 7 years in jail for that, learnt to paint in jail, and discovered he had a real ability to copy various artists, in particular Lowry, Picasso, and Modigliani. And when he came out of jail, suddenly all these long-lost Picassos and Modiglianis and Lowrys started turning up on the art market. He got rearrested. And then he thought, what I could do is actually do these copies, but put my own name on. He had an art exhibition in Brighton, and he asked if I'd open it. And as a thank you, he gave me a Lowry. And we hung it on our house, and we had a big art expert came to dinner one night. He'd been a director of Sotheby's and a television personality, and he said, "That's a lovely Lowry." I said, "Do you think it's real, Tim?" And he studied it for about 2 minutes and said, I can't see anything to make me believe it's not real." And I said to David Henty, "Could you copy a painting by an old master so well that even the world's authority on that painter could not tell it was a fake?" And he said, "Yep." And he told me how he'd do it. And it's in the book.
It seems like this book has so many different layers to it. So what would your message be that you want the readers to kind of take away from it and learn?
Yes, Picture You Dead is at one level, I guess, a classic Peter James thriller. It's got, murder, it's got pace, it's got tension, and my trademark short chapters. But I always, when I write my books, I try to, I love books. When I read, I actually learned something about maybe a world I didn't know about. So I hope that readers who read Picture You Dead and enjoy it will get an insight into the art world. There is this, I think we all think, oh, the art world, it seems a very gentlemanly profession and nice. But actually there's a lot of skullduggery in it. I guess because anything that there's huge money attracts criminality. And, I heard figures that something like 80% of the paintings presented to the major London auction houses these days are fake.
There we go. Picture You Dead by Peter James is out now. You're watching London Live News. It's time for a final break now, but when we come back, James Nichols will be here with the Art Review, a look at the best exhibitions to see in the capital this week.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of London Live News. It's time now for a look at some of the latest from the London art scene. Our resident critic, James Nichols, is here with his picks, and he started with the varied works from American artist Winslow Homer.
Welcome to this edition of the Art Review. I'm James Nichols, and here are some art exhibitions to enjoy in London at this time. Winslow Homer, Force of Nature at the National Gallery. This show is the first in-depth exhibition in the UK of the art of Winslow Homer, who at the time of his death in 1910 was the most celebrated American artist of his day. With paintings spanning over 40 years of Homer's career, this is an opportunity to discover the artist who, although a household name in America, is not as well known here in Europe. I thoroughly enjoyed my visit to the show. It explores the complex social and geopolitical issues of his era: war, race, class, power, as well as broader concerns with the fragility of human life and nature, themes that resonate with us still today. Homer's works capture scenes from the front of the lines of the Civil War, which was between 1861 and 1865, as he sketched battle scenes, camp life, and political issues in that period. One of his most famous paintings features a work from this time, Prisoners from the Front. He did in 1866. It was inspired by an incident where a Union general experiences humanity with captured Confederate soldiers. In 1867, the artist spent a year in Paris, in which he received much critical acclaim. Upon his return to the States, he was motivated by the lives of African Americans after the end of slavery. He illustrates attitudes and situations with the tensions of a new future confronting his country. He felt strongly about racial prejudices and produced his masterpiece, The Gulf Stream, developed from his time in the area. The Gulf Stream depicts a lone black man on board a small fishing boat, which he has his mast broken, and he's surrounded in the sea by sharks, with only a few stalks of sugarcane to sustain him, and oblivious to a ship in the distance as a hopeful sign of rescue. In 1878, he exhibited two works in London at the summer exhibition at the Royal Academy of Arts, and both are included in the show. He was fascinated by Constable's landscapes and Turner's oils and scenes of storms and shipwrecks. In his final years, the artist retreated to live and paint nature on the dramatic, rugged coast in Maine. I actually grew up by the sea, and when I was admiring Homer's brilliant paintings of the sea and the coastline, in my mind, I really could hear the crashing and the swirling moods of the ocean. I give this exhibition a 5-star rating, as the artist provides us with such an insight to the times in which he lived, and his messages have such a resonance for us today. Winslow Homer, Force of Nature, is on at the National Gallery until January next year. Next up, we have Frieze Sculpture in Regent's Park. Colourful, immersive and engaging for all the family, this is the 10th year of Frieze Sculpture in the Park and features a lineup of 19 international artists from South America, South Africa, Eastern Europe, Indonesia, Pakistan, India, and of course the UK. And they transform one of London's most famous parks into an outdoor gallery to celebrate the creative spirit of this city. Claire Lilly has been the curator for the 10 years and has brought the artists together for this show, which has gone from being a week-long display to a substantial summer and now autumn exhibition for London. Included are works by Robert Indiana, John Giorno, John Wood, Paul Harrison, and Tim Etchells. This is about the importance of coming together as a community and as a social voice looking at the world and environment today and possibilities for the future. The sculptures don't point you anywhere, nor tell you anything, or ask anything of you, for they point at themselves, tell you things you already know, and you have to ask yourself and have a creative experience and think about what really matters in life. The last 18 months has been so difficult for everybody around the world, and so these works are a joyful explosion of creativity to celebrate life and our environment. Free Sculpture is on view in Regent's Park through to November the 13th. Finally, we head to What Lies Within Us exhibition at Maddox Gallery in Notting Hill. This exhibition features works by a number of internationally acclaimed young artists presenting a diverse approaches of cultural identities and perception. The show is a visual contemplation of the question, who am I? Maeve Doyle, Artistic Director at Maddox Gallery, discusses the show.
We have a show that talks about art and figurative painting. Figurative painting has always been about representation, and this show dives into representation from where you were born to where you live to where you were educated and to what it means to be in the 2022s. 10 different artists who are examining identity, that identity around where they were born, compared to where they make a living or where they were educated or where their parents were born. There's a lot of mixtures going on, so nothing is one thing, and the energetic, abstract, figurative brushstrokes are sort of what's helping them discover who they are, from different techniques to different symbols. We're seeing a new figuration. It's incredibly exciting. If you're following the art world, post-pandemic has really examined the way we wrote history, and that history excluded people who were bringing back into the picture. This is revisionary and rewriting, expanding the narrative of what history is and whose voice gets to be heard. And we're so proud to be part of a show that's giving voice to voices that haven't been heard in London before. When you talk about history, you talk about how you learn your craft. And when you're expanding the narrative of European art, you go into different ways of making art, which may mean that you're using your fingers, or you're using brooms, or you're using non-traditional art materials. And you can see that within the canvases here. So there's so much energy and newness and a fresh approach to figurative art that I urge you to come and see this show. What's so refreshing is you can see the new message coming through in the energy on the canvas, on the mixture of different motifs, on a brand new making of what is a visual language. It shows right here in the canvases on Westbourne Grove. I like that the medium is the message, and so figurative painting is what they're working with, but because it's a search for identity, we see components of abstraction coming through. If you look at Amit's work, you can see a basis starting in abstraction, which indicates a search for a new way of thinking and seeing. On that, he builds a figurative painting and a portrait. So there's so much going on that's unanswered, and I see a big future for these artists. The timing couldn't be better for this show, I think, before Carnival, when we're about to have a celebration that hasn't been around for 2 years, and then a new language in painting. Like I said, this fits so nicely into the neighborhood of Notting Hill.
What Lies Within Us is on at Maddox Gallery in Notting Hill until the end of September. Thank you for joining me on the Art Review, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.
we are, that was James Nichols with the Art Review. It's time for a final check on the weather now, and the rain continues until this evening, where it's a slightly chillier night with overnight temperatures of around 11 degrees. Tomorrow, it's a dull start to the weekend, cloudy all day with highs of 17. A similar picture on Sunday, but we might get some sunny intervals throughout the day. Unfortunately, those sunny spells don't seem to last. Looking ahead to the start of next week, there's thick cloud all of Monday with some light rain showers expected. Well, that's all from the news team this evening. For more coverage, do follow our social channels at London Live, and we'll be back tomorrow morning with London's Weekend. See you then.